Welcome to What Does My Therapist Really Think, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what mental health professionals face every day. Our guests today are Hallie Palmer, a licensed independent clinical social worker and founder of the Therapy Guild, and Jesse Duncan, a Chicago-based licensed clinical professional counselor with specialized training in neuroscience, neurofeedback, and trauma-informed care. They're here to talk to us about geek therapy and the surprising ways that pop culture, comics, video games, and fandoms can be used as real therapeutic tools. Hallie, Jesse, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting us.
I would love for one of you to jump in and just give us an overview. What is Geek Therapy?
Geek Therapy is a nonprofit organization of people in helping professions. So it is primarily mental health, but we're open to anyone in any type of helping profession. So like occupational therapy, physical therapy, teachers, education, just any helping profession as a way to connect to the people that they are trying to help using an approach that is built on insight and understanding and noticing the things that a person is interested in, what they like. In this case, like geek culture, various fandoms, and using that to help and connect in ways for whatever goals, community building that they're trying to do.
It's creating a relatability to your patients. It's essentially trying to find a way to speak a different language than maybe traditional therapy approaches.
I would say so, that we try not to make it too obvious, like we want to infuse the work that we're doing with this, but it's another way that we can relate with our clients and build rapport. Not just build rapport, but also help them really understand some of the concepts that we're trying to get at, like some of the growth that happens in our sessions might be more beneficial if we can incorporate their interests in pop culture and media.
So I love how you use the word infuse. What does that mean versus we're just playing the video game and doing therapy? What does it mean to really infuse these different concepts into, I guess, more of a traditional therapeutic practice, or how does it differ from a traditional practice?
I guess in that way, I have one particular client that I was working with who really likes Game of Thrones. And we had talked a lot about Game of Thrones over the time that we had been working together. And I didn't even realize that this moment had happened until they brought it up later, where they were dealing with being stuck and just struggling, and was using the final seasons of Game of Thrones, how there was so much potential and how just didn't live up to its potential. If you saw or heard anything about the end of Game of Thrones.
Yes.
And so what I brought up to that particular client was how that was partly because the show creators at the time, the showrunners were tired of Game of Thrones and wanted to move on to other projects, but were being forced to be there. And that was part of the issues with why Game of Thrones ended up the way that it did, among other things, but the showrunners were not invested. And for my client, I pointed out, well, you are not fully invested in what is happening in your life, using this as an example. And then we were able to have that connection and move on. And because of using the things that my clients are interested in, the nerd fandoms, whatever it might be, video games, TTRPGs, it didn't click to me in that moment that that was a major connection that had happened until months later when my client brought up that moment of why having a therapist who knew and understood these are the fandoms, this is the context of this show. So it wasn't just, Game of Thrones as a show is something I've seen and it was disappointing, but understanding that here are the reasons why it was disappointing, and here's how we can connect that to your current life situation, was able to help my client to recognize what they needed to do and to take steps to change that.
Let me ask, and let me know if this is an offensive question to ask. Do you identify as geek? Is it okay to identify as a geek? Do you identify with geek culture? Is that important? I assume that that's important to, be part of geek therapy. You must have your own geek passions.
Yes, I do. I'm in a lot of different fandoms, movies, TV, comic books, a lot of anime, a lot of books, and I also cosplay, and I just love all of these things. They're a big part of what I do. For me, it is important to be a nerd, to be a geek, and to have all of these things that I enjoy.
I guess I usually call myself a nerd more, but I mean, we work with Geek Therapy, so, and honestly, that kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit better. But for as long as I can remember, I've been really interested in things that weren't necessarily mainstream, whether it be fantasy and sci-fi novels, Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z. Like, I would wake up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday so I could watch it on cable TV. And then Gargoyles, that was another fandom of mine when I was younger. And as an adult, I have really enjoyed a number of like really niche franchises, whether it be like this is not niche, but like Game of Thrones, or it might be like a little known fantasy series that I read that's like from the 70s. And then there's also, I'm pretty invested in tabletop role-playing games. That's actually how Jesse and I met, is through like utilizing TTRPGs in therapeutic and applied ways.
It's so cool. Were you guys friends before you found Geek Therapy, or did you kind of find Geek Therapy and then like build up, your own relationship?
The first time I attended TAGS, which was is the Therapeutic and Applied Geek and Gaming Summit that we hold every year. First time I attended, I think it was the year before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic set in, I started getting into a bunch of online spaces where I was learning more about how to utilize geek and nerd fandoms or interests in the work that I was doing. I was finishing up my graduate degree and starting to actually work with the populations that I wanted to work with. And I found a community of other people who also wanted to play games therapeutically, and Jesse was a part of that.
I had a similar story in that when I was in grad school, one of my classmates was wearing a Steven Universe bomber jacket. And I was like, oh, that's a cool jacket. Hey, let's talk and say hi. And then he told me about Geek Therapy and about like what they did and their podcast and their Discords. And I kind of joined, but I didn't really do anything about it. I joined the Discord, but I just kind of lurked. And then when I saw that they were doing the first tag, I was like, oh, I'm interested and I have time that weekend. Let me try and go. And that is how I met Hallie.
Yeah, I think our first game was Thirsty
Sword Lesbians. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
I would consider myself geek adjacent. I do a lot of improv, which very much easily goes into role play and a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of my friends are in these worlds a lot. And I found that there's just this immediate kinship when you realize you found someone else that is in this world. Like Jesse, you mentioned you saw some of the Steven Universe check. You're like, oh, you're my people. I can just tell. Do you feel like that is a part of why, using this approach in therapy is successful?
What research has shown when it comes to therapy, the most important indicator of how therapy is going to go and how effective it is the therapeutic relationship and is the rapport between the therapist and the client. And that has a lot to do with building trust and whether or not client or your patient will trust you enough to try the things that you present to them, or trust you enough to approach things differently, be able to do all of the things that can lead to healing and helping, and it is in building that trust. So with that geek culture of it all, it's like, oh, and understand this thing that I struggle with explaining to other people, and I either can't explain it to you and you get it, or I don't have to explain it to you. And that helps to build that trust and that understanding of, okay, you are presenting something that might be scary, or I might not know or might question if it doesn't work, but I can trust you in this realm and in understanding me and in understanding these things that I care about. So I will trust you in doing the further work of this as well.
I find, especially when I worked with children, but this happens a lot with some of my adult clients as well, that sometimes there's just not enough understanding around geek culture. And I do think it's a cultural competency thing. in a lot of respects, because there are some assumptions that are made by folks that don't identify as geeks or who don't have this strong affinity for this media, that if you are too interested in some of this media, that is like maybe disordered, that might be diagnostic. And there's something that Josue says, that's the founder of Geek Therapy, says a number of times in various talks that like we wouldn't say someone who spends too much time in bed, that sleeps a lot, that has a really hard time getting up and doing things, we wouldn't say that they're addicted to their bed. We would say they're depressed, or that like there might be some anxiety there. We would be looking for the reasons why this is interfering with their ability to move forward. And so with gaming or with pop culture, we don't say that if someone watches a lot of like Naruto, that means that they're addicted to Naruto. We would say that they really enjoy it. We would find out what they like about these characters, what speaks to them. And we'd also explore, okay, like, are there some areas of your life that you would like to be more like Naruto? Or that like maybe we can utilize this interest to help you engage in other areas of your life that you feel like you've fallen behind in.
We're really coming at this from like a multiculturally or cultural competence lens, which makes so much sense. And I know that you guys both kind of come from these transformative orientations, and how you specifically have feminist perspective, anti-racist perspective, in your bio. How does that show up in geek therapy? Just that geek cultures have come a long way. They're not as misogynistic, white flavored as they used to be, but obviously, like, I think that's there if we look at the history, right? So how do you, bring in that feminist, anti-racist perspective? I'm sure you're both doing this. I'm just picking on Hallie because it was in the bio.
A lot of what we see as being like popular culture is often geared towards appealing to a very specific person. It might be a white man in a lot of cases, or a white teenager. But that doesn't mean that people from different backgrounds or identities don't identify with some of these characters. Dragon Ball Z, I recently did a presentation on at TAGS, and I am not the identified demographic for Dragon Ball Z by any stretch of means. I am a middle-aged white woman. I'm queer. Dragon Ball Z is meant to be for Japanese boys, is what it was intended for. And then they like continue to market just for men in general. But there are so many people from different backgrounds that identify with these characters. Like there are only a handful of women in the whole show, and they are not necessarily my favorite characters, though as a new mom, a relatively new mother, I identify strongly with Chi-Chi more than I ever have. And people often will characterize her as this like really grating character. But the thing is, there are so many other things about these characters and these storylines that appeal to people. I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice to say that because this was marketed specifically for this type of person, then other people can't find value in that. But also it's getting better every day. Like every day, people are pushing back and asking for more representation.
I often use like a decolonial or liberation psychology lens as well. And one thing with it is looking at stories and narrative structures of, here are the properties that we know and like. What is it about it that we like? What is it about it that draws it to us? And how do the different systems that we are in impact that, and are there other things to look at? I really have been in like a big sci-fi swing the past couple of years, especially in books, and I've been reading a lot of Nnedi Okorafor, who is a Nigerian Afrofuturism sci-fi writer. And so in looking at and exploring a lot of those stories and narratives and seeing, here are different ways of approaching stories and narrative structure that still are here and exist within the greater systems of it all, and seeing like, these are the things that are still here and exist, and how to connect with different stories, different groups in that way.
One question I would have too is, is there a way that maybe you or maybe one of your colleagues at Geek Therapy have used this approach that has been maybe a little bit surprising?
There's one way that I have used it when I'm doing trauma work. The container exercise, it's a visualization exercise where you're essentially trying to take everything that you've been working on and you're putting it into a container, like a hypothetical or imaginary container that you can release the pressure on when you need to, and you can like tuck it away until you want to work on whatever's inside of the container. So like for written exposure therapy, that might be like a trauma narrative, which is what I would do. And so we would start with opening the container, maybe doing a little bit of grounding, and then get into the written narrative. And then when we're ready to finish the work, when we're done, when we're nearing the end of the session, then we would engage in putting it back in the container and closing it so that we can come back to it when we're ready. So something that I started doing with my clients is we started creating like really interesting containers. And so for some people, this could be completely fictional. They could have made it out of their own heads. For others, they might choose a container from a series that they enjoy, whether it be something from like Star Wars or from a video
Doctor
game.
Who.
Yeah, Doctor Who. There's no reason why you can't have it be a TARDIS. Like some clients come up with these really interesting containers that can, and sometimes we'll go so far as to like stash those containers in like hard to reach places that only they know that it's there. And so then we'll have a whole written script that I'll be the one to read, and I'll guide them through it. And we'll talk about how we're going to open this treasure chest, and you have the key, and you're going to pull out your materials and sit down at your desk, and we're going to work on this together. And then we even talk about putting it away. And so we often will utilize just various devices from the media that they enjoy.
So it sounds like to me that even just visualizing, instead of just like a normal container, like a Tupperware, that just visualizing something like a TARDIS is much more effective.
It can be. I would say it makes the like trauma work, especially narrative trauma work, is like you're asking someone to talk about the worst things that have happened to them.
Yeah.
So if we can create some safety around things that they enjoy or that they feel are like, this is a safe thing, then it can help. Not everyone responds to it the same way. Some people have a hard time with visualizing things. Some people just take things very literally. And so they might actually want a real container that they can hold on to and leave wherever we do our work. But I've had a number of clients where this makes that kind of work far more accessible. And also this is a fictional place that we're creating and or engaging with. So like they're not going to find an X-Wing fighter in their driveway that's going to like remind them of all of this stuff. Like this is a thing that they come to just in our session.
I do think there's like a protective factor to be had, because in our fandoms, I feel like there can be like a sense of ownership and pride and definitely identity. I can think of not the exact same exercise, but sort of adjacent. I think it kind of spun out of like the sort of neurodivergent affirming and like accommodating EMDR we were doing at the time. And she loves Disney princesses. Like she's just a Rapunzel girly pop, loves Rapunzel. I think it was that she didn't feel like she could access a container that day, but what she felt like she could access was an ally. And she was like, Rapunzel's with me, Cinderella's here to help me with this, Snow White's here to help me with this. And it was all imaginary, and we were very aware of that, but it just helped her to walk through the parts of her story and the parts of reprocessing she needed to do in that moment in her own unique way without any judgment for me or anybody else. And that was the only way she could get through that part of her process. So I think there is something really unique about these characters we identify with and how we can apply them to these other tools. I'm sure you guys have a million better examples. That's just something that came up for me. I don't know if princesses make it into Geekland, but
they do.
Okay, good. Yeah. I doubted myself.
She says yes. Hallie says yes. Yes.
So for TAGS, the Therapeutic Applied Geek and Gaming Summit, we record the presentations, and they are for continuing education credits with NBCC. But Ariel, who's also on the board for Geek Therapy, she does a lot of presentations with Disney princesses and a lot
her
of
name's
work
Ariel?
with Disney.
Oh,
Yes.
boy. Yes.
And so she also is one of the co-hosts for the Happiest Pod on Earth, which is one of our podcasts. And so there's a lot of past videos with work with the Disney princesses that we have on the Geek Therapy website, or on the TAGS website.
Amazing. Take that, Cigna. You know, it is evidence-based.
Yes. We also have some presentations on how to like write notes and treatment plans, and how to do like those specific work where it is we're utilizing these skills, and how can we make sure it is like evidence-based and covered with insurance, and make those connections as well.
It can be hard when you come into therapy as somebody who's neurodivergent, just period, end of story. But anything else, any kind of three-dimensional being that like has wants and needs, desires and interests, and we're supposed to come at everything from a blank slate. And I feel like there's a lot of pushback in the therapeutic community right now, but I think spaces like Geek Therapy, tags are really just taking that to the next level, providing this kind of authority backing to everything in a way that's still empowering. I don't know. I think it's just awesome. And I wish we had it 10 years ago when I was in grad school.
It just feels like the geek culture and the geek world is just a really special space to be, and a really special place to be. And it feels like the community is very strong in there. Those who aren't in geek culture, are we missing out? I don't know if I identify as a geek.
I think you're a geek. I think you're just a geek in your own way. You're like a, true crime geek.
We're all a geek for something, aren't we? Yeah. I'm a geek for The Simpsons. I'm a geek for the Spice Girls. I'm a geek for improv. And I think that actually certifies me as a geek. If I could be in the club, let me know. But I'm curious, what is it about geek culture that maybe people who don't identify as that are missing out?
Well, I mean, my hot take is that everyone's a geek for something.
There we go.
Like, they just might not think that they are. I personally believe that everyone has something that they could just gush about, that they could go on and on about, that they enjoy putting time and effort into, that they like learning about. For some people, that might be like Law and Order SVU. Like, they really are invested in Olivia's story and all of the work that they do. Everyone's got that uncle that really loves learning about World War II. He's a geek. I'm sorry if he doesn't like that, but he probably is. Or I've got family that loves NASCAR.
Oh, God, same.
Yeah, I personally do not understand it, but they love it. So I'm glad that they have something that they're passionate about.
Every Sunday.
Well, Katie's dad was a driver. I feel like she's neglecting that piece.
My dad was a driver and my grandpa was a driver. So therefore, we all must suffer.
We all must suffer.
Yeah.
My partner's really into F1 and mountain biking. And we talk about how he is definitely a nerd and a geek about these. He's also the one that got me back into Dragon Ball Z. Like, we all have a thing.
Totally. And if you don't, how sad,
I would say it makes life really exciting and interesting.
I don't know necessarily if it is missing out that people who are like, I'm not a geek, are getting when it comes to like geek culture in that community. But I think it is the community piece where humans are social creatures. They love to be connected with others and other people. And in geek culture, there's a lot less of the like general rules and structure of society. And it's a lot more creativity, performance, and allowing you to just figure out who you are and how you want to be in that space, and a lot more room to experiment and to try new things in the geek space, especially when it comes to like gender and gender expression, where every convention I've ever been to, that is just the place where everybody is trying on gender stuff for the first time. As a culture that is pushed to the sides, it allows more space for people to just figure out who they are instead of telling people who they are. And I think that is part of the appeal of geek spaces, or at least the kind of geek spaces that I've been in.
At the end of the day, I think people just want to feel seen, and people want to be seen and heard. And especially in an environment like taking care of your mental health, and you have to be vulnerable and you have to expose yourself, that I can imagine that it provides a great comfort to know that there is someone who at least like accepts you wholeheartedly for the things that you're passionate about and knows that there is at least that safety of opening up and feeling vulnerable and feeling that you're going to be heard and understood for the things that make you you.
I don't always know what my clients are talking about for the first time they bring up a thing that I haven't heard of. But when I start to see how invested they are and how much they light up when they talk about their favorite characters or this new mechanic in a game, it's just so exciting to see. I see clients that like they might have a hard time leaving their house, but they can do things that I've never done. Like they can like be really invested in MMO. So that's massively multiplayer online.
Yeah, massive multiplayer online game.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm like, I feel like there's too many letters. Like I've tried and I just get too anxious, but I've got clients who are able to make friends with other people and do these really hard things in spaces that aren't always the kindest. Like there's always toxic people when you get lots of people together, but they still find a way to engage in this thing that they love, despite that anxiety they might have.
I think there's also just like, there's a lot of structure to like geek subcultures. My partner is, I mean, we have, action figures under the bed and the closets, just everywhere. He's a collector. He's a geek. We love him. Shout out Joe Knight. But there's just such structure. Like there's always something to look forward to with like the fandoms he is into, because there's a new show. There's always a convention. That person who did, I don't know, the sound editing is going to be at the Anaheim Convention Center. So we're going to that. So there's always like something to be excited about, something to talk to someone about. He has friends that, he's had in his life since he was in 6th grade that just call him when the new comic book comes out. There's just these touch points, I think, in geek culture that we've lost in maybe some other areas of culture. And I think that's really unique and special, the way that community is centered around it. Or I think of a patient I have who is just, king, queen of the Ren Fair. And even if it's only once a year, there's something they're always looking forward to. They're working on the costume that they're hand building to bring to show to people. There's just so much structure around it. And I think sometimes we really need that, especially in the world today. Let me get off my soapbox. That took so long, but that's my point.
And one thing I would add to that for like providers or even for people who are thinking of, you don't have to know everything or anything about this, about a particular fandom or geek thing in order to be able to engage with it and have that connection and community. Like, I love the example with my one client with Game of Thrones, because I've never watched Game of Thrones. I've never read Game of Thrones. I just know stuff from other people and cultural osmosis, but it was still able to help that one person just being part of the community and knowing enough.
It's like a life preserver a little bit, geek cult. Like it's like, hey, like things we're going through this, and this, but if we can talk about this or relate it to this thing that you're passionate, it just feels like it's almost like a cheat code, if you will, to get someone to kind of get excited about something. Because that's so true, Andy. I feel in geek culture, like there's always something that's happening or something to be excited about. The passion is something that just cannot be denied, I feel like, about geek culture. And to know that passion is something that is alive in people and that can be tapped into must feel very safe, even if things in actual life are tough or hard and trying to process through.
I think it could be like a ground truth where, you're not sure what ground truth is in other places anymore.
So I work with a lot of autistic clients, and there are times in life when like they're starting to approach burnout. Maybe they're fully in burnout, and they might know this already about themselves. If they don't, then I usually help them notice it. But a lot of times when people are in burnout, especially I would say autistic burnout, we will start kind of I don't want to say regress. That's not strength-based at all. But we will reach towards the things that brought us comfort when we were younger. So for me, that might be like Ever After, a Cinderella story, like the movie.
Obsessed with the shoes.
It's so good.
If I could find those shoes for my wedding, I would have them. I can't find them, but I did look.
Fell in love with Drew Barrymore from that movie. And then like if I can't watch that, then it's going to be a Princess Bride, or maybe I'll reach to like The Dark Crystal, Or I don't know, I was a weird kid. I really liked the movie My Cousin Vinny.
No, don't ever apologize for being a kid who likes My Cousin Vinny. That's great. It's a perfect movie.
I love it. It's so good. But like, we often during periods of stress will reach towards these things that we enjoyed when we were younger, that we know that the whole storyline, we might even be able to recite it from like word for word, but it brings us comfort. It's safe because we know what to expect. And it also just taps into that like little bit of magic that comes with this kind of media.
I've been giving that assignment a lot to patients lately, when we're reprocessing and kind of stuck back. Like, I feel like I'm 9 years old. Okay, what did you need at 9 years old? What did you like then? I want you to go do that. You liked Max and Ruby? I know you're 36. I know we probably both are about 36, but today's Max and Ruby Day. And it's amazing how these old pieces of media that maybe you haven't seen in 10 years, maybe you watch every, 2 months, they make you feel safe in a way that hardly anything else can. And it's perfect because, you can just put it on YouTube, or you can just put it on the TV, or pop in a DVD if anybody still has those.
It's interesting because magic, I feel like, is very synonymous with hope. And that is, as you said many times, Andy, that is the job of a therapist, is to hold some hope. I mean, it must be kind of akin to like, I don't know, let me know if this is the dumbest thing ever, because I can cut it out because I'm editing this podcast, but is it almost like akin to like music therapy, or like horse therapy? Horse therapy? I'm going to cut this out.
No, horse therapy is a thing. It's something that
it's not called horse therapy though, right?
It's called equine. Yeah, like my boss has actually been working on trying to get a ranch so we can do that, because that was something she did as a kid and it was very meaningful to her. I don't want to be around horses, so no thanks. But yeah, with that, I would say, because music therapy, art therapy, which Geek Therapy is now Art Therapy CUs certified as of last week.
Oh, wow.
With art therapy, music therapy, other types of modalities of therapy, it is that not just talking about things, but expressing things. And with Geek Therapy, it is finding alternative ways to express things and to work through things. And creativity is a big part of that. I know you mentioned earlier, like the hope in the like run fairs and making this costume. And it is that, because I cosplay, it is a whole thing of just being able to be creative and to create something that you then get to wear and perform, because in a lot of ways cosplay is a performance of, for this amount of time I get to inhabit this character and pick up the traits of these characters that may not be traits that I have in my day-to-day life, but I get to do that, and I get to be here in this space with these rules around it, and that helps me to be safe. And in working with people, helping them to be like, okay, if you can do that in this setting, what are some things you might want to experiment in a different setting? What are these traits that you might want to take, that you inhabit when you are this character? How can you take these traits and then inhabit them in your day-to-day life? And talking about it in this way means you have to keep that part in. You can't edit it out.
Okay, great. I love what you said. Thank you both for joining us today. I want to make sure that everybody knows that you can go to geektherapy.org to learn more about this amazing nonprofit. You can also follow them on Instagram at Geek Therapy. Anything else I'm missing? Any other plugs?
We're currently working on a journal. So it's a peer-reviewed journal. It's open to submissions for anyone that's doing this work, or if anyone wants to be on the lookout for when the first issue comes out. But we're currently getting submissions. We have all of our editors. It's going to be peer-reviewed. So we do have that journal going. And then we have a bunch of podcasts and other things. You can check out the Facebook group, Discord, and tags as well. We have all of the videos from the first 5 tags are up. So there's 5 years of videos. The tags 2026 that happened, those videos are behind a paywall until next year, but everything else is freely available.
We've been doing a lot of work to try to make it so that like people have access to this. Like if you're getting stuck with a client, but you know that they have an interest, like we've got the GT library, that we've got all of the tags, like vault videos, like there's probably, if someone who's presented on it or written about it, that you can probably watch it.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Katie, for organizing and editing this a very exciting episode. I think we'll let you guys go. We'll cue Kenny, who does our theme song and is wonderful, probably geek himself. Ready, Katie?
Yep. Cue Kenny.
What Does Your Therapist Really Think is a Drea Media production. Theme song by Kenny Gray. If you want to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, all the socials, go ahead and do it at Drea Vita. Have a question for a future episode? Go ahead and send us a DM. Start your mental health journey today and head to DreaVita.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and send someone this podcast. They might like it. We'll see you next time.